diversification is a protection against ignorance. I mean, if you want to make sure that nothing bad happens to you relative to the market, you own everything. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a perfectly sound approach for somebody who does not feel they know how to analyze businesses.
Diversification, an idiot could diversify a portfolio, or a computer for that matter, and invest only where you have that extra knowledge. And then if you get just a few opportunities, that's enough. And what the hell do you care? You own 3 securities and JP Morgan Chase owns 100.
We think diversification is, as practiced generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing. Diversification is a protection against ignorance. I mean, if you want to make sure that nothing bad happens to you relative to the market, you own everything. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a perfectly sound approach for somebody who does not feel they know how to analyze businesses. If you know how to analyze businesses and value businesses, it's crazy to own 50 stocks or 40 stocks or 30 stocks probably, because there aren't that many wonderful businesses that are understandable to a single human being in all likelihood, and to have some super wonderful business and then put money in number 30 or 35 on your list of attractiveness and forego putting more money into number 1 just strikes Charlie and me as madness. And it's conventional practice, and it may, you know, if all you have to achieve is average, it may preserve your job, but it's a confession in our view that you don't really understand the businesses that you own. You know, I mean, on a personal portfolio basis, you know, I own 1 stock, you know, but it's a business I know, and it leaves me very comfortable. So, you know, do I need to own 28 stocks in order to, you know, have proper diversification? You know, it'd be nonsense. And within Berkshire, I could pick out 3 of our businesses, and I would be very happy if they were the only businesses we owned and I had all my money in Berkshire. Now, I love it, the fact that we can find more than that and that we keep adding to it. But 3 wonderful businesses is more than you need in this life to do very well. And the average person isn't going to run into that. I mean, if you look at how the fortunes were built in this country, they weren't built out of a portfolio of 50 companies. They were built by someone who identified with a wonderful business. Coca-Cola is a great example. A lot of fortunes have been built on that. And there aren't 50 Coca-Colas. You know, there aren't 20. If there were, it'd be fine. We could all go out and diversify like crazy among that group and get results that would be equal to owning the really wonderful one. But you're not going to find it. And the truth is, you don't need it. I mean, if you have a really wonderful business, is very well protected against the vicissitudes of the economy, be dependent upon the income from a given group of businesses. I would rather pick 3 businesses from those we own than own a diversified group of 50. Charlie?
Yeah, what he's saying is that much of what is taught in modern corporate finance courses is twaddle.
You want to elaborate on that, Charlie?
You cannot believe this stuff. I mean, it's modern portfolio theory, and yeah, it
has no utility. But I mean, you know, it will tell you how to do average. But you know, I think anybody can figure out how to do average in 5th grade. I mean, it's just not that difficult. And it's elaborate, and you know, there's lots of little Greek letters and all kinds of things to make you feel that you're in the big leagues. But there is no value added.
I have great difficulty with it because I am something of a student of dementia, and I have.
Yeah, we hang around a lot together.
And I can ordinarily classify dementia, you know, on some theory structure of models, but the modern portfolio theory, it involves a type of dementia I just can't even classify. No. Something very strange is going on.
Yeah. If you find 3 wonderful businesses in your life, you'll get very rich. And if you understand them, bad things aren't going to happen to those three. I mean, that's the characteristic of it.
By the way, maybe that's the reason there's so much dementia. If you believe what Warren said, you could teach the whole course in about a week.
Yeah.
And so I always knew from the very first, when I was a little boy, that the opportunities that were important that were going to come to me were few, and that the trick was to prepare myself for seizing the few that came. This is not the attitude they have at a big investment counseling thing. They think if they study a million things, they can know a million things. And of course, the result is almost nobody can outperform an index. Whereas I sit here with my Daily Journal stock, my Berkshire Hathaway stock, my holdings in Lilu's Asian fund, my Costco stock, and of course I'm outperforming everybody. And I'm 95 years old, and I practically never have a transaction. And the answer is I'm right and they're wrong. And that's why it's worked for me and not for them. And now the question is, do you want to be more like me or more like them? The idea of diversification makes sense to a point. If you don't know what you're doing and you want the standard result and not be embarrassed, well, of course you can widely diversify. Now, nobody's entitled to a lot of money for recognizing that because it's a truism. It's like knowing that 2 and 2 equals 4. But the investment professionals think they're helping you by arranging a diversification. An idiot could diversify a portfolio, or a computer for that matter. But the whole trick of the game is to have a few times when you know that something is better than average, and invest only where you have that extra knowledge. And then if you get just a few opportunities, that's enough. And what the hell does you care? You own 3 securities and J.P. Morgan Chase owns 100. You know, what's wrong with owning a few securities? Warren always says if you lived in a growing town and you owned stock in 3 of the best enterprises in the town, isn't that diversified enough? The answer is, of course it is. They're all wonderful places. And that Fortune's formula, which got so famous, which was a formula to tell people how much to bet on each transaction if you had an edge. And of course, the bigger your edge, the more close the transaction was to a certain winner, the more you should bet. And of course, there's mathematics behind it. But of course it's true. It's perfectly possible to buy only one thing because the opportunity is so great and such a cinch, or only 2 or 3. So the whole idea of diversification when you're looking for excellence is totally ridiculous. It doesn't work. It gives you an impossible task. What fun is it to do an impossible task over and over again? I find it agony. Who would want to do it? And I don't see why. My father had a client. He was a lawyer in Omaha. He had a client whose husband had a little soap company. And the guy died and my father sold the soap company. This woman was one of the richest people in town in the middle of the Depression. And what she had was a little soap company in a big mansion in Omaha's best neighborhood. And they sold the soap company. She had a mansion in the best neighborhood and $300,000. But $300,000 in 1930-something was an incredible amount of money. A little hamburger was a nickel, a big hamburger was a dime, and the all-you-can-eat cafe in Omaha would feed you all you needed to stay alive for 2 bits a day. I mean, $300,000. Well, she didn't hire an investment counselor. She didn't do anything. She's a wonderful old woman. And she just took that and she divided it into 5 chunks. And she bought 5 stocks. I remember 3 of them because I probated her estate. And it was, one of them was General Electric, one was Dow, one was DuPont, and I forget the other 2. And then she never changed those stocks. She never paid any advisor. She never did anything. And she bought some municipal bonds. She never spent her income. And she bought some municipal bonds from time to time with the incomes. By the time she died in the 50s, she had $1.5 million. No costs, no expenses. And I said, how did you decide to do that? And she said, well, she said, I thought electricity and chemistry were the coming things. She just chunked it all in and sat on her ass. I always liked that old woman. My kind of a girl. But it's rare. You know, but if you stop to think about it, think of all the expense and palaver that she didn't have to listen to, and all the trouble she avoided, and zero costs. And of course, what people don't realize, because they're so mathematically illiterate, is if you make 5% and pay 2 of it to your advisors, you're not losing 40% of your future. You're losing 90%. Because over a long period of time, that little difference causes a 90% disadvantage to you. So it's hugely important for somebody who's a long-term holder not to be paying a big annual toll out of the performance. And of course, there are a few big-time advisors now who are using indexation very heavily. And of course, they're prospering mightily. And of course, every time they get somebody, it's just agony for the rest of the investment counseling business.
I don't believe in diversification at all. I would own one stock if I could find one great stock. Diversification is a big mistake. I call it DI-WORSIFICAtion. You buy this thing that might balance this other thing and they both go down. So I don't believe in diversification at all. I would own one stock. But what I do believe in is if I find 10 good stories, they're all equally attractive, I buy all 10. And I wait to see them unfold. It's like watching 10 poker games. 10 games of stud poker. You watch the cards turn over, story 3 gets better, story 6 slips, story 7 stays the same but it goes up 50%, so you sell 7 and buy 2. That's all I do. So if they're equally attractive, I buy all 10. Then gradually some story says, oh my God, this is getting better and better, and guess what? The stock just went down. So you keep watching 10 stories and magically, because of that rule of stocks going up and down a lot, then you load up. You really, take a big advantage. So that either happens because something happens to the company or the market goes down and all stocks go down.